Hi, I'm JJ. Today I'm going to be doing my weekly roundup. It's probably about 8 or 9 days, but I finished all the ones that I wanted to finish for this month. Sorry, I dropped my book. And so I just wanted to do a roundup. This video is probably already going to be long because it's 5 books. And the one I just finished up is a history one, so there was a lot of information that I wanted to include that I thought was interesting and I wanted to share. So the first books, though, were I had to read for, or I chose to read for a book club. So one of them I have is a Discord that I'm in, and we chose a book, and the one that we chose was the Song of Achilles. This has been on my TBR for so long, and I was finally glad to vote for it and to get reading it. So it is a retelling of the story, the Illiad by Homer, and obviously, so the Song of Achilles. It's interesting because it's told from the point of view of Patroclus, who's a minor character in Illiad. Except he has a big impact on Achilles. And so I like that Madeline Miller called it the Song of Achilles because it's in the essence a ballad, a love song to Achilles. And so in the Iliad, one of the things that made me so mad was how selfish and childish he seemed when he kind of went berserk, when he was upset that his prized girl that he won in war was taken from him by his general, or by King Agamemnon. And so he was so upset about what he saw as a dishonor to him and what he earned. He stopped fighting in the war. And at this time, they'd already been fighting for 10 years. Everybody wanted to go home. Everybody just wanted to end to it. They knew Achilles was the best warrior, that the greatest Greek there ever was. And so him stepping away just to prove a point, letting his people he'd been fighting with for 10 years die, just waiting for an apology, waiting to prove his point that they needed him to win. I never really liked Achilles because of that. Like he just seems so temperamental and childish and everything. And so he still does all of that in this book, but it's tempered with and especially at the very end, it is about Patroclus saying, maybe please let him be remembered for more than his worst moments. Like he's supposed to be the greatest Greek hero, better than Hercules and all that. And what he was known for was how much he let down the people who, his band of brothers, his battle buddies, the people that he was supposed to have their back, and they were supposed to have his back. And so having that be what he's remembered for, Patroclus didn't want that to happen. He wanted him to, remember, he was a good person up until this war, how war changed him, how bloodlust and the need for glory and the need to feel respected and honored and trying to be immortal and please the gods and all that stuff tempered the goodness in him. How he was also a musician, he was also a kind person who helped people, and it's just a good meditation on memory, on legacy, on what is important, and kind of like a book that I had talked about before, when you have your eulogy or your obituary, and how your whole life is broken down in just into, you know, short sentences, and what people think is important about you. And so I think it was kind of a reclaiming of that and showing like all sides of Achilles rather than just this part that was blown out of proportion and only talked about in the Iliad. Another thing that I found interesting in this is that it dealt with grief, interestingly, and not just Achilles' grief for Patroclus, but grief in general. There was a really great moment with Priam, because he's the king of Troy, and he lost his son Hector to Achilles, and Achilles was dishonoring his body by, you know, just dragging it around and not allowing it to be laid to rest, be given back to the family. And the moment that they share together in their grief and that mutual respect, despite the fact that they've been enemies for 10 years, was a very beautiful scene. And this whole story, not only is it a retelling, kind of showing you more sides of Achilles, but is also a gay love story, because it shows, and not in subtext, Achilles and his relationship with Patroclus, which was interesting because it doesn't make sense in the original if they weren't together, because the way that he grieved for him, the way that he went berserk after him, makes more sense if they were actually a couple and together. So I'm glad that they put that in here. And if you have already read Achilles, or the Iliad, but kind of want a little more background or a deeper dive into it, there's a really great nonfiction book called Achilles in Vietnam, and it's written by a doctor who studied PTSD and trauma, and was specifically studying how in America the soldiers from that war, it was different than any other war they'd already been in. Not just the warfare in general, but how they were treated by their higher ups, how they were used by the government, how, you know, all this disrespect and dishonor and just usury that they felt. And how on top of that, you know, you got to trust the people that you're going to war with, and if you don't have trust for your chain of command or anything like that, like how that truly affects you. And so he talked about that and interviewed a lot of people, you know, survivors who came back and were battling with mental illness after. And he used his stories and all of his research and his study, and he applied it to Iliad and showed how Homer knew so much about the human psyche, about war's impact on soldiers, and he posited that Achilles, his overreactions and all that, like he explained what led up to them, and he explained how it was PTSD in the soldier, and you know, 10 years there without family, away from everybody, not being able to trust your chain of command, not being able to trust the people who should have had your back, just all this stuff that compounded and escalated until he basically just snapped. And how to understand reading the book with that in mind. And it made it, I have read the book prior and then read this new way of looking at it, and I've been meaning to go back and read the original, but I haven't. And so I read this now, and having that new lens on kind of gave me a bit more insight into reading this, which I think made it more understandable and enjoyable. Another thing is I did kind of like the little mention of Treolus at the end, because Cressida and Treolus, the Shakespeare play. I might have that first name wrong, but it is a fun Shakespeare play that people don't always talk about when they talk about Shakespeare, and it is his take on the Iliad. And instead of, Achilles, instead of the Greeks that you always hear about, yes, Ajax and Odysseus, and everyone makes a cameo in it, but it focuses on the Trojan aspect and how they are being, essentially occupied, they're being surrounded, and they're stuck under siege for 10 years, and kind of that side of it. And you have this, he's really great at tragic love stories, and this, bit of politicalness, and Cassandra, the sister who warned everybody, and if they would have just listened, all of this could have been avoided, and then we wouldn't have had two fantastic poems. But anyway, if you just want to do a big deep dive into the Iliad, I do suggest both of those. The Shakespeare one is fun. Like, it's actually a lot funnier than I expected, and it was enjoyable. And another one, if you want to explore retellings of it, I mentioned it earlier when I talked about this book. I'm going to read this book, is Wrath Goddess Sing. And that is a retelling in the sense that Achilles there is a trans woman. And so, or now I have to remember, Achilles is trans, and I can't remember if he's trans woman or a trans man, because there's the scene in there where he has to pretend to be a girl to hide out from the war and stuff, and so I don't remember if how that's all implied. Now I feel really bad that I'm getting it wrong, but anyway, just to have a trans Achilles was an interesting take on it. I really enjoyed that aspect as well. I would give this a 4 stars. It was well written. I actually enjoyed the last maybe 50 pages the best. I felt it had a few pacing issues and stuff at the beginning, but I get now what she was trying to do, and retelling his story and reclaiming Achilles as a whole person rather than the legend. So that front half had to be in there just to show you who he really was. So I get it now, and I did enjoy it. Another one that I read for a book club was Of Monsters and Mainframes, and that was, man, that was the most fun I've had reading a book in a long time. As you can see, I read a lot of darker stuff, deeper stuff, just, I sometimes need a break, and this was perfect for that. It still had great character development, great depth. It was still, showing you, getting you to think about what it means to be a human. But it did so in such a unique and brilliant and funny and fun way. It's a science fiction. It's found family. There's queerness. There's robots and a talking spaceship, and there's retelling of legends. So it features Dracula and Frankenstein and werewolves, retelling of like the origin of werewolves, and just, it was brilliant. Like, it was just, like I said, absolutely a wild, crazy fun ride. And you follow this ship whose human passengers on several different journeys have been murdered, and she knows it's Dracula, but nobody will listen to the ship, and they want to like decommission it. They want to keep like reprogramming it. They want to just condemn it as a ghost ship. And so a whole band of like unlikely heroes, unlikely allies who become a found family, decide that they're going to solve the mystery, they're going to stop Dracula, and they're going to clear this spaceship's name. And I listened to it on audiobook, which made it even greater because everyone was voiced by a different voice actor. And so the ones who did the ship, and the ship had a robot who was the steward of the ship, and it was the medical robot. And the voice actors did a great job on making them like sound mechanical, and it was delightful. But you also got to see the progression of, they're all about their parameters, their, detail oriented, they were programmed to react a certain way, and you get to see that evolve as they learn to care about what's going to happen to the ship, what's going to happen to them, trying to protect their humans on board, trying to solve this mystery, and just learning what it means, like I said, to not be a thing, not be a machine or a monster or anything, but be what a human is, what emotions are, what is real and felt, and what is programmed. And I enjoyed every moment of it. And I am kind of being mostly vague on some of the big things that happened, just because I went into it not knowing anything. And it was so much fun just to be, wow, what the heck is going on? So, I probably already gave you more than you should, but no spoilers to what actually takes place that's important throughout. And so those were the two that I read for book clubs. And then I listened to The Holy Road. It's the sequel to Dances with Wolves. And I enjoy Dances with Wolves. And I enjoyed this as well. It took it a slightly different way. So Dances with Wolves, a white former soldier is taken into the tribe and becomes one of them, and marries another woman who had been captured in childhood and was raised among the tribe as well. And her name is Stands with Fist, which is very telling of who she is as a person. And so they got together in the first one, and in the second one, now they're starting a family and stuff, still part of this tribe, and you really get to know the tribal members and the tribal life and stuff was like at that time. And the important thing is that now is when the army is advancing, and they have the directive to either get rid of all the indigenous people around the area through any means necessary, or put them into send them to the reservations. So that's what's happening at this time. And so Stands with Fist is worried that she'll have to be returned to the white man, which she doesn't want to be. She doesn't see herself as white anymore. And so she actually gets kidnapped, and then it's their Dances with Wolves journey of trying to get her back. And in the meantime, while he's off doing that, and you kind of get to see her, feeling of where she belongs type of thing. You also have the tribesmen, their family, get caught up in the reservation roundup. And so then you get this clash of their life versus the colonial life, the white life. And that was interesting just to see their differences and stuff, and the harshness then that they had to face once they got to the reservations and everything like that. So it seemed very well researched. It was interesting. The conclusion and stuff was heartbreaking, just because of the what it's all dealing with and stuff, but I thought it was a worthy sequel to the original. And on that note, if you want to understand more about these the captives, like Dances with Wolves' wife, Stands with Fist. So what a lot of the tribes did, just over the years and stuff, if they were in need of trying to expand their population was dwindling and stuff, when they went to war and other tribes and stuff, they would take the children, they would kidnap the children to try to bolster their population with this influx of new children. And so they started doing that to the white kids as well, as the families moved out west and forced them further and further from their areas that they roamed and stuff. And so there's a fantastic book called The Captured that talks about that time in history, and it follows and interviews a bunch of people whose family members had been captured, and the stories and stuff that they told. And he did a lot of research because he had just randomly was confused about what was on his uncle's tombstone once, and his uncle or his great uncle, and he asked, and he found out that his uncle had been the one of them who was captured. And so he made him wonder, like, what, I don't even understand what that means. So he did all his research and he tried to get all sides of the story. And a lot of them, I mean, anytime you kidnap a kid, it's traumatizing for whatever reason, like how the whites did it to them when they forced them into the schools and were trying to convert them. That is traumatizing, being taken from your family, being forced into a different way of life. But when he started interviewing some of these family members, some of them did not want to return to white civilization. They actually enjoyed the freedom and the community that they had out in the tribes. So you have this really delicate history going on, and that is a really great way just to understand, if you want to fully get the context of this story in particular. I highly recommend it. And another book that I finished recently was Nervous Conditions, and that was by a Zimbabwean author. And it was interesting to learn. I didn't know much about that culture, and so she primarily focused on the barriers to education for gender and class. And so it was interesting to see both of those things play out, whether you were barred or even just looked down upon. For some, if you were poorer, you looked down upon the ones who went to school because you felt like they were shoving your poverty and your uneducation in their faces. But then you had the ones who strove to be affluent enough to send their children to school, but then they would send the boys to school and not the girls to school. And so the book follows this girl who just really wants to go to school, and she finds a way to do it. And then she's living with her cousin for a while, and her cousin's very well educated, very well read. She spent time among the English to learn. And one of my favorite quotes in the story, and I used it kind of in some of my comments throughout this week, was when she was reading like some of the harder issues, and her cousin was like, why are you hurting yourself by reading something that's painful, or reading something that that's hard to read. And she said that facts are important because that's how you find the solutions. And I think that's really relevant in today when a lot of books are being banned or, in America, and how they want to rewrite history. They're trying to whitewash a lot of the different things, take out race theory, try to say slavery wasn't as bad as it was, or they're trying to say that the indigenous people willingly moved so that the white men can settle there. Like, they're literally changing what really happened. And it's important to reckon with what really happened and to learn it the correct way, because when you are ignorant of the past, as the old adage goes, history repeats itself. And so we can, like she said, only fix things when we know that they're broken, when we acknowledge that they're broken, that when we understand why and how they're broken. And I really enjoy that part in the book, especially since it deals also with, you have the Christian missionaries coming in there, and they're starting to think differently about their own ways of life, just because they're now being told that some things are sinful. They had people who had multiple wives, but now they're not allowed to, because that is sinful, and that shame that it brings, and how that affects the different characters. So she's starting to be shameful of her own family because her father does want to take another wife, and she's starting to see everything as a sin because that's what she's been told. And what's really interesting is towards the end, when she comes back and sees her cousin, who she really adores and who's really smart. Her cousin has very, very bad anorexia and bulimia, and she's basically down to nothing. And her parents don't want to get them help because they think that it's shameful to ask, we don't need to see a psychologist or whatever. That's that's the English part that she, she learned that from the English. It's a disgrace, she'll be fine just being amongst us. And so, even when she did finally try to get help, nobody understood and wanted to, touch it. And just so the barriers to mental illness, to class, to race, to religion, to gender, all that stuff is explored in different ways as you're, learning about the culture. You're learning about her, the family dynamics and interactions, because it overall is a family drama, and it follows the main girl as she navigates being educated, and now more educated than her father or her mother and stuff like that, and how they think she's being too important and self-important and stuff by wanting to be further educated. But then you have this knowledge, unlike we do, that when you educate women, it rises, the whole community rises, because women are the cornerstones of a community. And so by raising them, you raise the whole community. And so these barriers, when they're keeping, the women down, the men, like her brother, got educated and then left. Women would get, she got educated and stayed. So they're bringing that education and that knowledge and stuff to raise up the community. Whereas, her brother is like, oh, I'm better than my community now because I know stuff that they don't know, and I don't want to be amongst this. And so just those different dynamics were very interesting to read. So that was the fourth book that I read. And then I just finished, because I tried to read or listen to Hell's Angels by Hunter S. Thompson, and it was his foray into the Hell's Angels motorcycle club, which was a huge club in the 70s and stuff, and it was very a criminal organization and stuff. And I don't know, I couldn't get into the writing style. I didn't really like the narration that well. I don't know if I'll give his Fear and Loathing in Vegas a try. I'm not sure if I would like his fiction better than his nonfiction, but with me trying to listen to these free audiobooks before they expire, I don't want to waste my time on something I'm not enjoying. So instead, I listened to The Lost Islamic History, and I am so glad that I did. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I took some notes that I'm gonna share with you. It was a great, overview of the history, and it leads up into just beyond the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and just like a little bit beyond that. So it's not like current history. If you want a current history, I really enjoyed The Black Wave, and that talks about stuff that's kind of more relevant to today. But this is the history. And so what I found fascinating was that he did an overview of a lot of stuff that I had already known about, but then he went into depth on some things that I was glad because I didn't know about. And so when he was talking about the advancements in mathematics, astronomy, geography, and medicine. And so with mathematics leads into astronomy leads into learning about geography and stuff, and how they were able to calculate the circumference of the world to a very close proximity, which is fascinating, especially for how early on they did it. And as for geography, there's information of Muslim transatlantic voyages that are pre-Columbus, and nobody talks about them. Columbus is the one who's discovered the New World, despite the fact that the Vikings were also there first. So to know that the Muslims were there as well first was interesting, and how with mathematics and stuff they triangulated everything and measured, and so all their architecture, like it was able to face Mecca, despite the fact that like they really had, they were doing it from like so far away and could still figure that out using very similar to what we use now for GPS coordinates and stuff. So just to know how long ago they did that, and how for medicine, which was based in the Greek, and I did know about Ibn Sina, and I don't know, I'm probably very badly at pronouncing his name, Ibn Sina. And so he had like this manual, basically a kind of like all the medical ailments, stuff that he knew about, just kind of to have a catalog. And he had tuberculosis. He talked about mental illness and how your mind does control aspects of your body, and stuff that we didn't even acknowledge until like we talked about it with like Freud and Jung and stuff. And then he had talked about anesthesia, rabies, breast cancer, kidney disease. Like all this stuff was in his essentially like a medical journal type of thing. They also invented the first hospitals, and this part was fascinating to me, especially living in America where we are so out of touch and not having universal health care or anything like that. And so they created hospitals specifically to give aid, free aid to the poor, because the rich could afford to have physicians come to their houses. They could afford to have specialists and all that stuff done. So it's the poor who needed the help. So they put these hospitals in cities so that they could help the poor free of charge. And that's kind of the system that later on Europe adapted and stuff, but they were the first ones to do that. And that's amazing to me. And the other advances that they had their own jurisprudence for laws and stuff. So they started with like what does the Quran say? Okay, it wasn't mentioned in the Quran, then what did Muhammad and his followers do or say on that topic? Oh, that wasn't said. Well, what do we think they would say? Like, so they have this hierarchy of like how to follow and, you know, how to obey the law. And they had advances in sciences, including light. So Ibn el Haytham, I am so sorry. So he was really advanced the idea of light and how we see. He calculated the density of the atmosphere based on the light on the horizon and how it filtered different colors and stuff. And it wasn't even able to be proven or disproven until the Soviets in the US with their space race, you know, in the 60s and stuff, went up into the atmosphere with their spaceships and stuff, and were able to calculate how accurate he actually was with the density. He also created the first like an ancient form of the camera obscura, which is what later people used to develop their camera obscura and stuff. And so all these things are just, they fascinated me to learn. You know, and then it was also talked about, like the beginning was talking obviously about Muhammad and the beginning of Islam. But what was interesting, especially with the way that we have the Christian nationalists being so anti-Islam right now, but it was interesting to know that so the Romans exiled the Jews from Jerusalem in 70 AD, you know, when they were killing all the Christians and everything. And then they also, so when Islamic, when they had their conquest in 637, their treaty allowed the Jews to finally come back in and worship there. So I just found that fascinating because everyone is always trying to pit all these religions against each other. And yes, there was the Crusades, and yes, there was this stuff. But there was a lot of times throughout the history that many of these different religions lived together in harmony, or at least tolerance. And as Islam spread and stuff, there was a lot of places that they allowed them to still practice Christianity or Judaism. So I thought that was worth saying. And speaking of that, there has a really interesting longer part about the Spanish Muslims, which fascinates me anyway. It always has, because when you think about Spain, like you're thinking about like later Spain, like the unified Spain under Ferdinand and Isabella, where you know, they had the Spanish Inquisition. They were so intolerant to any religion other than their Catholicism. And then with the Spanish Inquisition, Spain was the only one when the Reformation happened and the breakaway from Catholicism, and you know, we had you know, the Protestants, the Lutherans, and all that stuff going all over Europe. Like Spain never got touched. Like nobody converted. You know, they didn't have the Reformation in Spain that they did because of all that intolerance. But prior to that, like 500 years or whatever before that, when you had the Islam reach Spain and you had the Spanish Muslims there, like that part just fascinates me. So they allowed, you know, the Jews were not allowed in other parts of Spain at the time since it was ununified. But when they were in this Muslim area of Spain, they were allowed to live in peace and prosper. And so there was a lot of big Jewish philosophers and thinkers going around at that time, and advancements in their thought and their religion. So I thought that was interesting. And to go along with that, so once it got unified, and just before it got unified and stuff, and they're starting to push out all the other religions again, then you have the information about how, they went through, Africa and stuff and settled in Africa, and a lot of the the northern African countries learned and became Islamic. And so this is something that I never actually even thought about. So when you had the slavery, and you were, going across the African continent, and they were grabbing, anyone they could, like, I didn't realize how many Muslims were slaves, and how hard that would have been to stay Muslim in the New World as a slave, because you can't pray the 5 times a day. You don't get to do your pilgrimage, your Hajj, and like all that stuff. So it kind of eventually they would have to either convert or like hide their religion until like people just essentially forgot about all of the Islamic slaves that were there. They did stage a lot of revolts, which was interesting, and a lot of the Muslim slaves were well educated, because in Islam they were very well educated. They valued education, and so they would come and be slaves, and a lot of them were more educated than their masters, and that part, like, it's just it was a blind spot in my knowledge, and I was very interested in learning that. I didn't know. So I found that interesting. And then when we were talking about the Crusades, so I am jumping kind of around, but it was just stuff that I noted and I thought was interesting. So during the Crusades and stuff, I loved that it had a big section on Salah ad-Din, which in the West we call Saladin. And so I always found him fascinating, but to just to learn a little bit more about him, especially from the Islamic side rather than the Western side, because there was a lot of respect there, especially he shows up with Richard the Lionheart and all this stuff. So there's this like, sort of knowledge, but not like a full education on him. So I liked to get more information about him and his role and stuff after. And then how he, there was a united Muslim world, and that was fine and dandy, especially to improve their odds during the Crusades. They were able to retake Jerusalem and all that stuff. But then you have the Mongol invasion and Genghis Khan coming, and how it was interesting. We got a whole overview of Genghis Khan and how that affected the unification of the Muslim world up until then, and how it broke it apart, and how the Mongols then spread and their contributions and stuff. And because of all these, the Crusades and the sputtering of the empire, because the Mongols come, you then have all this interaction with Europe, and that then leads to Europe learning all, like they were emerging from the Dark Ages, and now they have all this knowledge from Islam books and all this stuff. When they were able to translate it from Arabic, they advanced, and that helped them get, Renaissance and in Age of Enlightenment, and all that stuff was like inspired from the clash of these two cultures and what they were able to translate from all the ancient Arabic texts. So you have Galileo and Copernicus and all this stuff inspired by what they read and learned from the Islamic thinkers and scientists and stuff. So and then another, so I just like that it gave a really great overall view. Like it was more condensed, you know, like, but it gave me stuff that I would want to, you know, that's why I took notes on certain things and others, just so that I can further research and maybe find writings about different stuff. So I did not obviously include all the stuff that it talked about, but the stuff that I wanted to look more into. And another thing that I never really thought about were the Chinese Muslims, because they did advance east, not just west. And they talked about, you know, how they became some civil servants and like some of their some of their thinkers and stuff, just because, you know, of their good education and everything like that. And so they had a very famous Chinese Muslim explorer, Zheng Ha, and he it made a point to say he was fully Chinese and fully Muslim. You know, like he was both, and he was one of the famous explorers. So I don't know much about all the stuff that he explored, but I definitely wrote it down, and I'm gonna research him further. But yeah, I found this book absolutely fascinating. I definitely give it a 4.5 star. I did have a really good reading month, because the Song of Achilles I would have rated 4 stars, of Monsters and Mainframes, and that might not be for everybody, but since I fully absolutely enjoyed it, and it was what I needed at the time, I gave that a 5 stars. The Holy Road, I gave like a 3.75, 4 stars. Nervous Conditions was 3.5 stars, and then this one was 4.5. So I had a enjoyable reading for the last like 9 days, but I am on to more, and I will be posting my August TBR on my next video. So I know this one was long, but I had lots of thoughts, I had lots of good books, and I hope that I didn't bore you too much and that you at least found something enjoyable. I will post the books that I read and the ones that I mentioned that are good companions for each of them down below. So happy reading, happy end of July, and welcome to August.